The modern nation of Mexico has a rich history that goes over 13,000 years into the past. It included multiple different advanced civilizations, including the Olmecs, the Mayans, and the Aztecs, and that was persistent in the area until the Spanish conquest in the year 1521, and was greatly influenced by the Catholic Church and European culture at that time. There was a declaration of independence of Mexico from Spain in 1821, and the modern state of Mexico was formed in 1917. It's made up of 32 different states, and it's governed by a federal representative democratic republic, which means that the president is the head of the government as well as of the executive branch. Geography of Mexico is as varied as its history. There are two primary mountain ranges in the eastern and western portions of the country called the Sierra Madres. It has an extensive coastal area on both sides with the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. There's also ranging geographies and climates from high mountainous plateaus all the way to the rainforests, which would be found in the Yucatan Peninsula. One thing that's surprising about Mexico is that you would think that it may be more of a rural type of culture, but actually only 20% of the population of Mexico lives in rural areas. Approximately 80% live in cities, and more than half of those live in cities that have more than 1 million populations. The rate of growth of urbanites in Mexico is growing at 1.6 per year, and actually the number of people who live in rural Mexico is going down marginally every year. One example of the urbanization in Mexico is that Mexico City is the fourth most populous city in the world and has 23.4 million residents. Whenever you look at the health and safety in Mexico, they have some of the problems that you would see in the more industrialized nations, as well as those that are in less developed nations. It's kind of a crossroads. In Mexico, 50.6% of the population lives below the poverty line. And in that, there's a great number of obesity. Females are 32.8%, males at 24.3%, and that's something that you see usually in more developed Western countries like the United States. 13.1% have diabetes. And one thing that is important is that whenever you look at rural Mexico that is not nearly as developed as the urban areas, that 5.5% have no access to adequate sewage, and they practice open defecation, which leads to a lot of diseases that can affect the communities and also some of the more agricultural areas, so you get problems with the food supply. Probably the one thing that everyone is the most familiar with is the drug cartels, which are vying with the government for control in multiple states. In 2017, there were 25,339 murders by the drug cartels. And quite honestly, the State Department classifies many of the states in Mexico, and particularly northern Mexico along the U.S. border, as being as dangerous as places as Yemen, Syria, and Afghanistan. Access to health care is quite limited, and you do have to have money to pay for your own way. Education system in Mexico is also quite lacking. As recent as the year 2000, only 33% of the population graduated from high school. And though that number has gone up, the performance on comparative testing with other members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development still lags far behind. Communication in Mexico is primarily done in Spanish, as about 94% of the population does speak Spanish. There's 68 different languages that are spoken in Mexico, but the minority languages represent a very small portion of the fraction. The way that it is done is typically not direct or confrontational, but the language of Spanish is a quieter language. You're going to have different things like a smaller personal space. It won't be unusual for people to actually touch one another during conversations. And also, you're not going to ever get hard committed answers like a yes or a no. It's always going to be more of a maybe. Also, the time considerations in Mexico is that appointments are seen as relative. There's no punctuality necessarily, and also that you're going to be seeing things happen at a more methodical pace. Before the formation of the modern state of Mexico, much of the governance was done through the Catholic Church, and actually there was no distinction between the church and the actual state governments. This has been ongoing since the Spanish conquest, the strong influence of the Catholic Church. Typically, the society is patriarchal, and also the husband or the man of the household is typically not challenged in his authority or decision making, and women, the mothers, are seen as the heart of the family. Large families were the norm, as is common in Catholic families who abstain from birth control. That trend has been changing over the last few years, and smaller families and nuclear families limited to just parents and children are becoming much more common.
It is very important in the Mexican culture to maintain cultural autonomy. Mexican Americans are often bilingual and fluent in English. They usually maintain the values and beliefs of their culture but learn to adapt to the one they may assimilate. Those that were born in the U.S. or migrated at a young age are brought up in the dominant cultural setting that differs from the Mexican culture. They are often pressured by family members to maintain cultural ties and often refer to themselves as bicultural. The male gender role is associated with machismo. High value is placed on demonstrations of strength, valor, independence, self-confidence, knowledge, and the ability to provide for the family. It also denotes a sense of respect and acknowledges his authority. Men are the head of the household and make all major decisions, and they are the sole providers and responsible for the welfare and honor of the family. The female gender role is associated with Marianismo. This is based on the Catholic veneration of the Virgin Mary. Women are spiritually superior to men but must endure all suffering produced by men. They are expected to be modest, submissive, dependent, sentimental, and gentle caregivers, and to be devoted to their home and family. They also are to deny themselves on behalf of the family. Mothers are accorded a significant amount of respect and hold a great deal of power within this role. Women rarely work outside. If they do, they often work as nannies or in hospitality or clerical jobs. Health is considered a gift from God and should not be taken for granted. People are expected to maintain their health. The protection of health is an accepted practice that is accomplished with prayer, the wearing of religious medals and amulets, and the keepings of relics in the home. The medical system in Mexican culture is curanderismo, that uses curanderos as holistic healers to help treat the social, physical, and psychological problems of the community. Illness is seen as an imbalance in the individual's body, and the causes can be grouped into 5 categories. The body's imbalance. Imbalance exists between hot and cold, causing an illness. Hot diseases are treated with cold substances and vice versa, and there is no general agreement on what defines a hot or cold illness. Dislocation of parts of the body. Empajo is believed to be caused by a ball of food clinging to the wall of the stomach, causing stomach pains and cramps. Empajo is treated by gently pinching the spine with prayers being recited. Caída de la mollera occurs in dehydrated infants whose anterior fontanelle is depressed. This is believed to be caused by touching the baby's head, and there is no folk treatment for this illness. Witchcraft. Brujas or witches use black magic to cause illness. Curanderos use white magic to cure it. Herbrillas sell herbs, amulets, and talismans to ward off illness. Strong emotional states. Susto is an illness resulting from fright where the soul leaves the body. Curanderos coax the soul back into the body. Envidia or envy is also considered to be a cause of illness and bad luck. Mexicans have a blended genetic history that includes Central Americans, Native Americans, Spanish, Africans, and various Indian tribes. Skin tones range from very light to dark brown. Eye colors can be blue but is mostly brown. Hair is usually black and straight. Mexicans have a higher likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes due to various genetic variants. They also have the highest risk for alcoholism. They also have risk for coronary artery disease, hemorrhagic stroke, obesity, and hypertension. They do, however, have the lowest risk for cancer with the exception of cervical cancer, as Mexican women are twice as likely to get that. Mexican men have substantially higher proportions of end-stage renal disease, and a mutation in the arrestin-1 gene in Mexicans can cause retinitis pigmentosa. The Mexican culture is a very positive one. They do, however, have higher levels of depressive symptoms in elderly women. Research has shown various common personality traits prevalent in the culture, the most common being the passive, affiliative, obedient type. There's also the self-affirming and rebellious character, the active internal control type, and the passive external control type. Research has revealed clinically relevant genetic polymorphisms in the pharmacogenetic encoding drug metabolizing enzymes. These specific enzymes are CYP2C9, CYP2C19, and CYP3A5.
While tobacco smoking and alcohol consumption in Mexico are relatively low, Unhealthy diets and lack of physical activity are causing a drastic increase in the obesity levels. Studies have shown that obesity levels have tripled in the past 3 decades, and it is estimated that about 3/4 of adult men and women are overweight in Mexico, and there's a high percentage of children who are starting to become overweight or obese and are presently overweight and obese. Diabetes mellitus and ischemic heart disease are amongst the top 10 causes of death in Mexico, as shown on the chart to the left. Then below that is stroke. And Mexicans are less likely to recognize high-fat foods and tend to eat more meats and saturated fats and use fewer low-fat dairy products, which helps contribute to the overwhelming number of deaths for diabetes and ischemic heart disease. In regards to the youth population, there's a large proportion of pregnancies that do take place under the age of 20. As study showed in 2003, that 17% of all births in Mexico were to women under the age of 20. And the prevalence of chlamydia and gonorrhea are relatively low in Mexico, but studies show that incidence of HSV2 is high. Unhealthy behaviors have been shown to be more prevalent in poor areas, and again, another study showed HSV2 is high amongst the urban areas of the poor that were poor. And then just below, there's a chart on the prevalence of tobacco use, use amongst the youth. So there's still about 19.8% that are currently using tobacco amongst the youth. For the family, eating was always done together, never separate, as meals were always something that brought us together. This establishes that to Mexicans, food helps identify the importance of family and togetherness. Family unit is the single most important unit in Mexico. Mealtime is often associated with family time, and families do often eat meals together at home. Mexican family celebrations may involve the social pressure to overeat. And if you decline food at social occasions, it's often seen as rude and it's socially unacceptable. Herbs and spices can be used to enhance and protect health. And one belief is that illnesses can be caused by an imbalance between hot and cold, so this balance must be restored. Their diet is rich in complex carbohydrates such as corn, beans, rice, and breads, and protein. Food is often spicy, but that spice and the degree of spice varies depending on the region of Mexico. Popular fruits and vegetables often includes tomatoes, avocado, mango, pineapple, papaya, and one of their favorite drinks is aguas naturales, which is a fresh fruit blend with sugar and water. Nutrients that can potentially be inadequately represented can be stuff such as calcium, iron, vitamin A, and C, as well as silicon. They do drink large quantities of sodas and or beers, and tap water is often unsafe to drink in Mexico. If you have a skin rash, one of the things that they believe is that you can go ahead and apply some cornstarch to help make that better. Minor wounds, they're going to clean that with lemon juice, and then if you have a burn, they'll rub raw onions on it, apply pork lard, cooking oil, or they'll even apply egg whites or cooked beans to the burn. And then in many Hispanic or Latino families, women are often primarily the primary caretakers, and they possess the most knowledge about healthcare. Men are expected to always behave in a way that is considered masculine or macho, so they do often avoid seeing healthcare as long as possible.
A fertility practice used in this culture is the sobada, which is an abdominal massage aimed at promoting fertility by increasing blood flow to the ovaries and relieving the uterus from stagnant blood or energies. Children are viewed as a gift from God in this culture, and a lot of importance is placed in pregnancy. Pregnant women are expected to rest, eat well, walk to remain fit, and leave their jobs. The extended family and community exerts a strong influence on health practices related to pregnancy. It is believed that the pregnant body craves food that it needs to grow a healthy baby, and that unsatisfied cravings might result in birth defects. Mexican women often use midwives or parteras. It is their duty to give advice and aid to the pregnant woman, guiding her through the pregnancy and the delivery. With the onset of labor, the mother is instructed to shower and empty her bowels. She's encouraged to walk until the delivery is imminent. Several home remedies may be used to stimulate labor, such as comino or canela tea. After the baby is born, the partera stays for several hours and returns the next morning to check on the baby. The mother is cared for by the women of her family. The mothers are not supposed to shower for several days after birth, and most mothers breastfeed their babies. The placenta must be buried in Mexican culture to prevent animals from eating it. It is believed that if it is eaten by a dog, the mother will not be able to bear any more children. The same is believed to be true if it is thrown in the trash. If the baby is a girl, the placenta is buried near the home so the daughter will not go far away. If it is a boy, it is buried far away from the home to ensure the child's independence.